Hello, I'm your host William, and welcome to Property Talk. In today's episode, we are thrilled to have G, the founder of Under450k, with us to chat about affordable property investment in Australia. Under450k is a free website packed with in-depth analysis of budget-friendly areas. G shares what inspired him to create this platform and his mission to help others find properties under 450k instead of gatekeeping everything. We'll dive into the current state of Australian property market, talking about the latest trends and the challenges investors face when looking for affordable options. G offers practical strategies for successful investment, including tips for spotting undervalued area using data, along with the importance of thorough market research and local insights. In our spotlight session, he highlights a few upcoming hotspots for investment and share insights from a recent performance review. Finally, G shares his predictions for the future of affordable properties, giving us a sneak peek at what to expect in the coming years. So join us for this engaging discussion that mixes data-driven insights with personal stories, helping you make smart investment decisions. Hello, welcome back to Property Talk. And today we dive into the world of affordable property investment. We have a special guest today with us, and his name is G. And he is the visionary founder of Under 450k. So, with the Australian property market becoming increasingly competitive, finding properties under the 450 mark or circa 450 can be daunting. So, today we're going to dive into this aspect, and then special guest G will share expert insights on strategies for navigating this niche, uncovering hidden opportunities, and the importance of time in the market. So, G, give us a quick introduction of who you are and the mission behind the website or the community of Under 450k.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me on, Will, as well. It's great to try share my insights as well on another podcast, and it's nice that you have me on. And I think the sort of the main reason I started under 450k was because you know what, I couldn't afford property, around Sydney, around Brisbane, and capital cities. 1 million plus. It just was unaffordable. The borrowing capacity I did not have. And I really wanted to buy property because everyone knows in Australia that to get ahead in Australia, you have to get on the property ladder. It's just one of the easiest ways to get ahead. And so I had to diversify my thoughts and look at where I could afford. And that's sort of how everything started and started coming to be. I started looking for properties under 500,000 and started looking for locations and suburbs around $450,000. And one of the struggles I've come across in the property industry is that it's quite gate kept. Everyone sort of hides information. Buyers agents are charging you, 15 plus $1,000 for the same information. There's a lot of courses online that cost quite a lot of money to do. And I was like, well, let me just put my research out there for free. And for people who are similar in a position to me, can't afford those services, might be able to get a couple of nuggets out and go ahead with their research as well. And so to sort of level the playing field is why I started under 450k and, yeah.
Okay. So in the 450k, what kind of content are you providing? What can people go there and find out?
Yeah. So under 450k started off as a newsletter where I deep dive into specific suburbs, whether it's a hot market or whether it's a cold market. I go into in detail analysis, including infrastructure, location, data metrics such as days on market, stock on market, etc., and also give my own personal opinion and verdict on the suburb and whether it's going to rise, whether it's going to fall, or if it's just going to stagnate. And I go into very fine detail. And as well as I've recently started a YouTube channel as well, but that's more on a region basis. So I cover Townsville or Albury or Perth in a whole region to give a more holistic approach of what's happening in an individual market. And I think that's what investors or people looking to come or research property can find on under 450k.
So I assume like 450k is like a sweet spot with 10 to 12% of deposit, and targeting
Mhm.
that price range, you can achieve positive cash flow outcome. Is that
Yeah,
a correct
absolutely. You're right.
statement? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first started investing into property, before the interest rates, skyrocketed, buying under 450k with good yields actually put you in the positive if you bought right and properly in a good market and you get the capital growth. But obviously, with the interest rates, everything is either neutral or negatively geared at the moment, and that's okay because interest rates will change and it's cyclical, and that's okay. But that's the reason why I started looking under 500k, under 450k, because buying the $900,000 property or the $1 million property, it's always going to be neutrally geared. If not, you're putting too many eggs in one basket, so to speak. So that's where I started to look at, because I believed having two 500k properties is better than just one $1 million property, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Diversification.
Yeah. And especially this strategy can work better for someone with a modest income, right? But they have to start from somewhere, right? And then this is a great starting point. Otherwise, they'd have to keep saving, accumulating, and then you might miss the boat. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I started my journey on a $75,000 income, and that's how I got my first investment property. And since then, I've increased my income and increased my borrowing capacity. But I think anyone, pretty much anyone who has a decent income, who lives below their means in terms of renting, maybe even share housing with someone, should be able to afford a $500,000 property if you have the deposit, of course.
yeah, cool. I'm trying to pull out that 450 is your rough kind of range. It can vary. I think just a good
Yeah.
hook to get customer in the
Yeah,
door,
it's
and
pretty
then
much, yeah.
yeah.
It's pretty much my title, and to be completely honest, it's getting harder and harder to find these suburbs under $450,000. It's getting quite hard, and realistically speaking, we're looking at 515 under.
Mm, yeah. If we want to stick with townhouse, you
Yes, if
might.
you want to stick with a house, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apartment, there's plenty of opportunities for under 450,000 for sure.
So you talked a little bit about your motivation behind this community or this platform. So yeah, and you mentioned that you don't want to keep that location selection as a secret. Is there anything else that you being part of your kind of the driver to start this initiative? Is there a commercial goal in your mind when you start this off?
No, so actually, when I started this off, it was purely to take my thoughts in my head and then to put them on paper, because that helps me clear out my own head and lets me structure my thoughts and ideas and understand, by writing what is happening in an individual market. And it seems like some people are benefiting from these articles. And I thought, you know what, there could be a commercial opportunity from here. Nothing that I think will, turn into a full-time business of sorts, but something of a side hustle, you can say. Yeah,
Mm,
and I have an online community which I've just started, just created. But once again, that's just a community for people to ask questions and get answers to directly from myself. But I will never gatekeep suburbs or property location, because I want to create transparency within this industry.
mm. Yeah, cool, awesome. And then if
Hmm.
we can stir a little bit further away from the 450k for the moment, and then just talk a little bit about yourself. Gee, I'm quite keen to get to know you a bit more, like where you at in terms of property portfolio building and what's your goals, a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a modest income and a modest job in the consulting industry. And like I said, I started getting into the property industry because in Australia, the game is rigged towards property. If you don't own property and you don't own assets, you unfortunately get left behind. That's the reality. And we see it today, and the divide is getting wider and wider,
Yeah.
unfortunately. It's just the hands were dealt with. And I'm looking for my third investment property at this point in time, and I have two already. From there, I will almost max out my borrowing capacity. So I'm looking to buy under a trust structure with this next one, and sort of build up that cash buffer before I go for this third property. Essentially, yeah.
Okay, cool. So you want to reserve your borrowing capacity for the trust structure.
Yeah, so because unless the only other way then is then to keep increasing my income, and there's a limit to that, unfortunately.
Mm.
And so by using a trust structure, and again, you have to speak to your accountant to get the specifics on how to do it. But if you use a trust structure and the property becomes neutrally or positively geared, essentially from layman terms, the bank doesn't count that debt as a debt. Essentially, it sort of gets wiped out, and then you can go in and you can keep your borrowing capacity for the next property.
Yeah.
But it's very hard at the moment with current interest rates.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it might be just a matter of time when the
Mm.
RBA start to reduce the interest rate. Yeah. So
Yeah,
you never know. Just hang in there, I guess.
100%,
Yeah. So,
100%.
and have you come up with any shortlist in terms of the next move? Like what kind of area? I assume you still looking at regional area primarily.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. There is nothing under really $500,000 anywhere anymore in capital cities in terms of Perth or in Melbourne.
Mm.
Even if you find something in Perth under $500,000, it's not going to be very of high quality investment grade property, and it's going to require a lot of maintenance. So
Yeah.
the main key areas, and I'll let your audience be the first to hear it, is going to be Geraldton in Perth. I think not many people talk about that. It's a 40,000 population. It's quite economically diverse. It's a hot market, even though it doesn't seem like it. There is barely any stock on market in certain suburbs in Mount Taracoola and Wandina, I believe. And some of these properties are going within hours and you know what? It's partly driven by buyers agents as well. I know for a fact that a lot of buyers agents are within those areas buying those places up. And the other location is Albany. Again, a 40,000 population, very diverse in regional Perth, in
Mm.
regional Western Australia, sorry.
Yep. Yep.
Very economically diverse. There are certain suburbs, again, which you want to target in there, which is Orana, Lockyer, and Spencer Park from memory. Beautiful location, economically diverse, great beaches. Internal migration is very strong as well, and also very affordable. And that's one of the key drivers as well for property capital growth in property. And those are two areas that people aren't talking about, but buyers
Mm.
agents are buying there. People are focused on Townsville
Yep.
and and regional and Perth, but they've missed out on a couple of these locations. And a quick SQM research. I'm not too sure if your viewers know
Mm-mm.
the tool SQM research. If you go in there and type the postcode, you can see the trend starting to pick up very, very quickly. A couple more months before buyers agents come on their YouTube channels and start, talking about these areas as they bought there 12 months ago.
Mm. Yeah. Generally, when you heard a lot of from the BAs, pretty much they stop buying this certain area. So this is when they come up and
Pretty
say, "Hey,
much.
look, check this place out."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely, because they don't want the extra competition, and that's completely understandable. That's their business model. They're meant to be there before everyone else, right? So
Mhm.
that's why you pay them the big bucks. But yeah, those two locations I think have great potential in the future. There's I've talked to agents within the area, and there's absolutely no stock coming on. Like construction there's a 2-year lag on in Albany, and some of these places won't have any new homes, and internal migration is strong. So I think there's going to be a serious demand factor. It will
Mm.
be capped by affordability, but there's still plenty of room for those house prices to grow.
Yeah. Just so quickly speaking, the small towns, the word you mentioned, like the ceiling. So there is only certain headroom for it to grow because it has to match the local income or affordability, right? Because this is why I'm a bit hesitant looking at the small regional towns like this. So I can't
Hmm.
envisage it will double like in 5 years or something like that. So that's just my hesitation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't think any of these locations you should be buying in necessarily just because it might double. But I think if you, look at some of these locations, if they're $450,000, $500,000, and the affordability is probably would be near 30% of someone's median income in that area.
Mm.
But these places they eventually extend to 40% or even sometimes above 40% in terms of affordability because people are willing to stretch their budgets to secure a home, especially when it's owner occupier driven.
Yeah.
And you kind of see that within capital city markets where people are spending 40-50% of their income on mortgages, right? So, just because they're not in mortgage stress doesn't mean they're not willing to extend their borrowing capacity or their debt essentially.
Yeah.
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 But I don't think something that's $450,000 today will become 800,000 in 5 years. But I think it has plenty of room to grow.
Yeah.
For me personally, I'm happy to wait till next year. And I think every 3 months, it takes about 3 months to see actual market trends shift. Minimum 3 months, in my opinion. right? So if I don't buy, within Albany or Geraldton soon, or in the next 3 months, then I'll be probably looking to do complete reanalysis and see where the market's at and see if it's still
Mm.
going to grow or if there's other emerging markets. But it takes a bit of time for these market trends to pop up, and you want a couple of months of consistent market trends to actually determine what's happening. If you just go through one market 1 month and you see a swing, then that's a bad way to go about investing in property. But you need to see trends. Trends are very, very important.
Yeah. Later, we might have a bit more time to dive into that topic to understand your approach to identify these emerging markets. And then I think you have posted an article to kind of do a bit of review, like 3 months or 6 months review, which is quite interesting. So we can discuss that later. So maybe I should maybe start to pick your brain in terms of the property market trends and some of the challenges investors face in finding affordable properties. Because I think you've been there, done that.
Yeah. I think in terms of overall Australian property market trends, unfortunately, if you've just started investing, I feel like you'll have a big shock. And that's because almost everything during COVID, essentially COVID changed the way property market, everything is just more expensive nowadays. Everything seems like it's gone through a boom and a big curve. Of course, there's markets within markets that haven't, but COVID has just, exaggerated house prices over the past 2 years. And in general, what people will find is that far north Queensland and regional suburbs in Queensland is booming, like Gladstone, like Townsville, like Rockhampton, and Perth has gone through a boom, and it's still going, but not to the effect that it was accelerating like a year ago. And I think as well, now that Queensland has boomed and Perth has boomed, people are trying to find the next boom location, and I feel like there's a shift towards Melbourne. And Melbourne's a bit interesting. In Melbourne, there are two groups of investors. One who haven't invested there and are thinking this is the next boom location, and the ones that have invested there who are like, this is a bad place to invest. I need to get out
Mm,
right now. And I think is a bit of, and Melbourne's very interesting in terms of investing just because of the state government and, they're more pro renters, which is completely fine. But the yields aren't as good as in Melbourne as they're in regional Queensland or regional suburbs in general. What's also interesting is that South Australia is still growing a little bit. And I think that's sort of gone under the radar, but it has also gone through its boom. That's the thing. It
mm.
has gone through its boom. And New South Wales, there's not really much happening that's worthwhile, I think, talking about. Yeah.
So you haven't checked out some of these small or regional towns in New South Wales, like the I don't know, just a few names off the top of my head, like Double or Armadale or Tamworth, stuff like that.
So I've looked at Orange and Dubbo, and I think the reason was that stock on market was quite high in these locations. So there wasn't any real house price pressure.
Mm,
And when you look at the days on market trend, you could have seen they were increasing as well. You might have to verify this and just go check this. But I believe there were days on market was trending up, and they didn't really pop up on my radar. Now,
okay.
Tamworth did pop up on my radar. But I haven't done a deep dive onto Tamworth's economy. But what I have noticed is there's a lot of investors in that area. Now there are a lot
Mm,
of properties sub $450,000 there, so it's very it's very cheap area. But there's a lot of investor activity. Almost West Tamworth, South Tamworth is about 50% investors in there. So there's 50% of renters, and that's a lot of competition. And yields aren't strong there as well. Is what I've noticed.
mm,
And that's made me a bit wary about if it's the right time to go into that market. For me, no. But if you're looking for that really affordable, cheap house property, it is a location that you could consider.
yeah. Because there is a general myth regarding affordable properties that they all tilt towards cash flow play because they're
Mm,
general, because low entry points, hence the higher yields. And they can be high in the growth. So that's what we have
mm,
been experiencing in the last couple of years. The small place can grow quite dramatically as well. If we look around in Australia, there are more than 15,000 suburbs or locations across the country. So, and if we really look harder, we should be able to find any opportunity that no one is really kind of pay attention to. So I think that's probably the mission of your platform.
Literally anyone can go onto domain.com or realestate.com and just put house price filter $450,000,
Yeah.
and a list comes up of all the suburbs and all the locations with houses available for under $450,000. And it doesn't take too long to realize that places in Melbourne, such as Ballarat, Geelong, Shepparton, all have properties well under $450,000.
Mm,
Now, that doesn't mean it's a good investment just because it's cheap to enter and cheap to buy.
mm,
There's a lot of stock in those areas. Yields are poor. It's all a bit of timing of the market, because if you can't hold that property, even though if you get it cheaply, you'll be in a lot of financial stress and mental stress. Um, I think when the tide shifts to those areas, that's when those prices will elevate as well.
yeah. Is there any other kind of challenge that you see as an investor or the new investors coming in the market to start
Yeah.
their portfolio scaling? Do you see any other challenges there?
Yes, absolutely. I think if you go through the Facebook property groups in Australia, there's a lot of people with different opinions, and what I feel like there's a couple of things, right? Number one is fear of missing out, because everyone's talking about Townsville, everyone talked about Perth, everyone is like just missing out and they want to get something and secure something. And they miss out on the fact that property investing and building a property portfolio is a long-term game.
Mm,
It's going to take 15 years plus to build a good property portfolio. No matter what these buyers agents tell you, or no matter what these Facebook ads tell you about, you can get financially free within 5 years. If you can do it, amazing. But for me, and the way I look at it, it's a long-term play. So not only choosing the right suburb to invest in, but choosing the right type of property, whether that means buying a solid brick home that's 1990 or more built, and understanding what street you're buying on, the type of property, the type of roofing as well. It's all important. And I think people they fear missing out, and they go in and they make a bad decision. And there's a second part to this as well, is that people don't understand cash flow, I think, because when the people who bought in Townsville 2 years ago, they made a very good decision, because they're cash flow positive or cash flow neutral, even with interest rate rises. But the people who you're just jamming into Townsville now or jamming into Perth now, I don't think they run the numbers properly, and they overpay for the property that they're buying
yeah.
in the hope that it will continue growing. And it's still growing. I'm not saying it's not, but they're paying a bit more than what they should for the same amount of property that they would purchase a year ago. And that means they're taking on a bigger debt, and they're having to pay higher end repayments. And I don't know if they're actually calculating their repayments on like a 10% interest rate, right?
Mm,
What if interest rates do go up another one or two, right?
yeah.
We all think about cuts, but what happens if it does go up? Do you have the cash or the income to supply that, to service
Mm.
that debt? Because the bank's just going to take that house away if you can't pay it back. So you got to think about it properly. And I think people don't run the numbers properly. They need to learn better about cash flow and do the maths behind it, and really see if the yields stack up as it used to. I think that's one of the biggest issues. Fear of missing out and not understanding cash flow is the biggest issue, I think, at this point in time.
Yeah, I think to your point, that could be an intentional thing, but with affordable price range, you tend to get better yields, right? So in that
Mhm.
sense, you don't have to fork up a lot to kind of maintain or to service that loan. It's a more secure strategy in terms of just chasing capital growth, aiming for a
Mhm.
higher entry points, which could be a backfire thing. So yeah, I think that's a sound strategy. Oh yeah, I just remembered what I was trying
Mhm.
to raise. So I heard that there are two kind of ways of finding the property. So one is top down. So you really start with the economical sound state, for example, or state in the better with a better growth potential. Right. You start with the state, and then you go down further down to the suburb, and then to the street, and then maybe to this specific property per se. So this is
Mhm.
from top down. And then the other way is that you just do like you said, just to go to domain or real estate and filter under 450k, and then you start to really skim through. If a property, with a good structure and looks good, neat, and then also if they have a advertised rental yield, which kind of suitable for you, and then you can start from there. Okay, I just want to hear your thoughts. Which way do you use? And then, yeah, just pick your brand and then see your thoughts on those two kind of research approach.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm happy to share what I do. So what I do is I go onto like HTAG or DSR data. Those are the two sources I primarily use.
Mhm.
Sometimes I use both because I like to cross-reference things personally, even though they cost a lot of money.
Yep.
But what I do is I go in through and I set a couple of filters because you can set filters on them. So I go onto days on market, stock on market, vacancy rates, and things like that, and I put certain numbers in that match what a hot market should represent.
Mm.
And when you put those numbers in, it will chuck you out a list of suburbs. And then I go into each individual suburb and look at market trends. That's one way. And the other way that no, I don't know if I necessarily thought this up, but I just kind of sat there and was thinking, I'll go into Wikipedia and I looked up the biggest regional towns in Australia based on population size. And you get a big list coming up. You got Bendigo, you got Ballarat, you got Geelong, and then you got Townsville and Rockhampton. And then I just kind of sat down and started looking at each regional locations. Has it gone through a boom? Has it gone through a property cycle? Is
Mm.
it affordable still? Can we still invest? And then I go more and more into detail. If it's not boom, then I go more into detail of that suburb personally, because I'm trying to, catch near the bottom of the market and then it's starting to grow. That's what I
Mm.
try to achieve.
Okay.
So there's two ways. There's two ways to do it.
Okay. That's actually a great segue to the next question that I want to maybe we can discuss or elaborate. So this is around your how you identify undervalued area. How did you kind of spot a hotspot per se? You mentioned that you have a couple of metrics that you use to measure the market, like you said, the days on market, inventory level, or vacancy rate.
There's average vendor discounting as well. And okay, so there's two parts to this. One, there's undervalued areas, and then there's hot markets. They're all becoming hot markets.
Mm,
Those data metrics I talked about earlier and that you mentioned, days on market, stock on market, they help you determine whether a market is becoming hot or whether it's warm or whether it's cold, a cold market. And when we talk about undervalued areas, this is what I mean. I think Geelong is undervalued. I think Ballarat is undervalued. I think places like Shepparton undervalued. They're very, very cheap properties for the type of quality of property you get, plus the land size. If you're getting 700 square meters of land plus a house brick for under $450,000, I consider that to be undervalued, in my opinion. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a hot market and it's going to grow in capital growth in the near time. So, what I like to do is I like to go through those metrics and determine those hot markets. And then from there, I go into looking at the affordability of these areas. That means like comparing the median incomes to the actual house prices and the mortgage repayments that they have to pay.
mm,
If it's under 30%, that's a clear sign that it's undervalued and that it has room to grow. Now, to actually time the market right is when you have to look into those days on market. Is it trending down? Is the stock on market trending down? Those two metrics, days on market and stock on market, dictate supply and demand.
mm,
If demand outweighs supply, house price will grow. That's pretty much it. I consider my whole thesis, you can say, on supply and demand.
mm.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
And if prices are too expensive, then demand will naturally increase because people can't afford those locations. And just because investors can afford to buy in those risen markets doesn't mean that's what the average owner occupier can afford anymore.
Mm. Right. Okay.
And then
Okay.
that starts to create a bubble.
Okay. You don't look at any building permits in the area or any council planning in terms of, rezoning and
Oh,
stuff
no,
like
no,
that?
no. No, I absolutely look at that. Sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like the next step. So once you've picked your suburb, that more comes into property selection, I would say. I don't like to buy in a flood zone. That's one of the biggest reasons I was very, very hesitant with Townsville and
Mm,
Rockhampton. You just see these big, large rivers. It's very prone to flooding. I mean, I think Lismore as well is a very undervalued area, but they had a huge flood which caused house prices just to fall for a bit, and now it's starting to pick up again. I think don't quote me on that, but yeah.
mm,
Um, I do look at council. I make sure it's in a residential area. I don't like medium housing density because an apartment can pop up and that will like damage my the house price for sure.
mm,
Um, Low residential areas. Definitely look at council plans. They're all free online. You can just search them up for yourself. I don't buy in bushfire, or if I do buy in bushfire is hard in regional locations. So sometimes I would consider bushfire zones, but not flood zones. And I just make sure I have good insurance. I don't buy anything under heritage zone because I don't know the implications of what that could
Yeah.
happen in the future, especially with local councils. They make up their own rules. So I try not to be in a heritage zone for sure. Apart from that, I think as well, if you can buy brick, I think it's a good thing, especially if you want to play the long term game and hold it for like 15 years plus.
Yeah.
Sure, brick. I think brick is the way. It's solid foundation. Oh yeah, and one thing I hate, and personally for me,
Mm.
you know, I would never buy on a main road. I would absolutely never.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Like, if I was an owner occupier or a renter trying to, just go about my day, I wouldn't want to look at a house on a main road and be like, I want to live there or I want to rent there. You can't sleep at night knowing that a car with a loud exhaust is just going to go by. And I
Yeah.
love cars with loud noises, so that's this. So that's the thing, right? So there's a lot of things. One is suburb selection, and then you've got property selection. There is two parts to it, and you do have to understand both because you don't want to buy the wrong property in the right location. It still will grow, but like when it comes time to sell that property, you're going to struggle. You will
Mm.
struggle.
Yeah, so I think,
Uh,
yeah, right. So we have to, the data tells something, right? And then that lead us to location. So some location that we might be able to use to dig deeper. And then, but eventually, when we talk about property investment, it has to be the individual brick and mortar, right? We talk about. So that has to be, that's not something the data can tell us. We have to
mm,
inspect. Either you do
mhm.
virtually or you be there physically. That's a topic for the another day.
And the thing is as well, right? Like, I trust data only to a certain point as well. All these computer generated numbers, it's good to see the market trends. But what I do is I pick up the phone to about 3 or 4 sales agents and ask them genuinely, hey, what's happening in the area? Is how long is properties actually being take to sell? I'm looking to buy here. Tell me, like, what's the sort of market price going for a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom, or 4x2, or etc.
Mm,
Right? And the reason you call 3 or 4 is to make sure the information is consistent. If one says, yeah, it's getting hot, it's becoming hot, like, and then another one says, oh, nothing's really happening, then there's inconsistencies. But
mm,
if everyone says it's, yeah, properties are selling within a day or two or a week or within 30 days, that's
mm,
when a market is really becoming hot. And that, I think, gives you much more confidence than just looking at numbers on a screen.
mm,
Especially if you're like an investor from Sydney or like Melbourne and you're looking at other regional locations, you're not going to go down there. Let's be honest. You're not going to go down there and look at the property. So you have to actually call the agents and be like, what's happening? Please tell me.
mm.
Because you need to know from another human being what's actually happening, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Even when I do my newsletters and my articles and my YouTube videos, I actually call them and I just act as an investor, be like, hey, I'm looking to buy in this area. Can you sort of tell me what the market is happening at the moment? Do you think it's a good time to get in? Do you think it's undervalued? Or do you think it's going to be very hard to find a property? And if they tell you, there's not many listings coming on or they're getting snapped up very quickly, bam, 100% hot market. There you go. That's what you want to be looking at. Like when I was researching Kangaroo Flat in Bendigo in Melbourne, sorry, in Victoria, I
Yeah.
called a couple of agents and he said, yeah, look, it's getting pretty hot. Like it's a good market. There's properties under 550k, even sometimes 500k. And then I called another agent and he's like, yeah, nothing's really happening. And I'm like, oh, okay. So somewhere along the line, what we're seeing is that the market is unsure. It doesn't
Mm,
know where it's going. Are people looking to buy here? Are they not? Or is it too expensive of an area? And that's where you can sort of confirm. If you're unsure and if agents are unsure, that might not be the best market to go into because you don't want it to go become a cold market, right?
mm,
You want to get confirmation from a couple of agents to saying that, hey, yes, this is becoming warmer, it's becoming hotter. You know, I don't even have time to talk to you. That's how hot the market is at the point, you know?
yeah.
So yeah,
Agree.
I do have when I researched Kangaroo Flat, I got very contradicting opinions about the area. Maybe he was just trying to sell me a property. I'm not too sure,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. By calling a couple of agents, you'll be able to validating your thoughts based on
Mhm.
data, and that will give you some confidence if they
Yeah,
kind of line up with each other.
absolutely,
Uh, yeah.
absolutely. I think yeah, data only takes you too far. Only takes you so far. I
Mm,
would say don't trust it completely. It takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of your day to make 3 calls on a Monday morning, and they will be happy to answer to
mm,
you. If they want to sell you a property, they'll be happy to answer.
yeah.
And if they're not happy to talk to you, then you're talking to the wrong agent. Talk to someone else.
Mm. Or if they don't return your call, that may be a signal of hot market, so they don't have time
Yeah,
to.
Very possible, very possible. Make sure you leave a message, and if they call you back, then they're a good agent. They're looking to find a customer and looking to talk to you to sell you something. Hmm.
Cool. I think we've covered some of the high level of the strategy in terms of how to identify a hot market and some of the techniques that you use to finding them. Maybe give us some examples, like some spotlights. Maybe
Yeah,
give us two or three places that just take us through your research and then your verdict.
yeah, absolutely. I think when I did my April to June review, the first one I did was Seventh and Hyde in Queensland in Bunbury.
Mm.
And I didn't really think that the prices were going to grow any further, and it really hasn't. It started to stagnate for the past couple of months. And you can see how a market that's just gone so hot has gone increased so high to the point where, people can't afford it anymore. The demand isn't high anymore, and supply starts to creep up and the prices start to stagnate. I think that's an example of a hot market, becoming cold, what may seem like overnight, but it's taken a couple of months and it's gone cold, I would say.
Mm.
The other location I think that people don't talk about, again, this is depends on your risk profile, and I think it's Grafton. Since I reviewed it in May or the end of May, it's grown about 14%. And you can check this on SQM research.
Wow.
That's sort of what I base the numbers off. And South Grafton, I think, is a pretty good economically diverse regional location. It has a big river that does flood, so it
Mm.
has that risk
Yeah.
profile. So make sure if you go there, you get the right type of insurance and you get the right type of property as well within that area. And look at the flood mapping. You can see it online. It's completely free. Go to Flood Mapping New South Wales. I forgot the exact name or website name for that. But if you go there, you can see if the property falls under a flood zone. If it does, you'll pay higher in insurance premiums. But there are locations within Grafton and South Grafton that don't fall in that zone. And it also is decreasing stock on market. So there is still a bit of price pressure, but it's not like a hot market like Townsville or Rockhampton, etc. It's more of a warm market that's growing very, very steadily, which is sometimes better to see than just a complete bamboozle of prices, you can say sometimes. I think as well, people, if you do the sort of data metrics like I was talking about, you'll come up with suburbs like Kalgoorlie
Mm.
and like Collie, but these are all mining towns. And, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole because it's dependent on one industry. And if something happens to iron ore prices or, China stops buying our coal, then, our prices start tanking, people start losing their jobs, the capital of house prices start going downhill. So
Mm.
with those locations, I wouldn't say that's a good location. I also reviewed South Australia, and this is where I was pretty interested with that. It's still growing steadily, and it's gone through a boom, and I think it's just growing steadily in general. But Elizabeth North has grown about 8% since I reviewed it in May as well, which is quite interesting. Yeah, and it's still it's affordable for a capital city. Let's just say that it's still people can still get in for around 550,000,
Yeah.
but not really lower than that at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Armadale still keeps on growing like crazy.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm.
You been to Grafton? Because I know there is a annual like Jacaranda festivals. So on that
No,
particular
no.
weekend,
Okay.
everything, the whole town turned purple.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay, I had no idea. No, I haven't
Yeah.
been to Grafton. Is it a good location?
Yeah. To stop by, yeah, and then have a
Mhm.
Jacaranda ice cream.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, do you want to do a spotlight of a location you haven't covered before?
Mm. That I haven't covered before. I think there's an article coming out tomorrow because it's a Wednesday, but that's going to be talking about Mount Taracoola in Geraldton again.
Okay.
And I think as well, like I mentioned previously, Albany and Geraldton, I think they have good chances of growing pretty high. And, you know, I know buyers agents are buying there. I think as
Mm.
well, another call out as well, if you're looking to diversify and if you're willing to hold a bit of negative cash flow, Shepparton is growing steadily. It's not a hot market. It's not a cold market. It's just a normal market, a very warm market. And there's properties very undervalued. Again, it's a flood zone. So please be careful which property you buy. Make sure it's not in the flood zone or otherwise your premiums will be higher. But Shepparton has some good locations where you can go buy a property in there for pretty undervalued, I would say.
Okay.
That's not really talked about as well. I think I did cover it in the YouTube video though.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's worth checking out.
Cool, thanks. I feel like some of the regional Victoria towns, like the one you mentioned, Shepparton, I think they're just
Mm,
on a stable increase trajectory. Like you,
pretty much.
yeah, I don't know why. Like the Hamilton, like small, even the small ones, like Hamilton,
Hamilton, yeah, yeah.
Albury, yeah, they were just still tracking along. They're just not staying flat or yeah, I don't know why. That's a
No,
bit
and
different to Melbourne. Yeah.
I think maybe that's the good thing though. I think that's how honestly that's how property should be,
Mm,
realistically speaking. They shouldn't
agree.
be like these, big spikes of growth and then completely flat for no reason. And we always say that property averages 7% annually per year. So if we're going by that metric, Shepparton's doing pretty well. In that location, Albury went through a bit of a spike, but it's going steadily increasing up. And that's generally how property should be. And if you're holding for the long term, it really shouldn't matter. But it's just those people who are looking to build that property portfolio in a very short period of time. They need those, rising capital growth so they can pull out the equity and then go again, for example.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
I think those are some call outs
Yeah.
definitely worth checking out, and do your due diligence and research as well,
Oh yeah,
and make
Dave,
sure you run the numbers.
a question just occurred to me. Do you track previous growth for an area? Let's say for the last 5 years or 10 years, it has grown a certain percentage, and then you have a selection criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a tough one. What most people look at is, last 3 to 5 years of growth, and they look at also the 10-year average, is what I find, or the 7-year average. That's at
Mm,
least what, a lot of these buyers agents they track. A lot of these, a lot of people track these metrics. At the end of the day, if supply and demand is strong, if demand is high and supply is low, and the area remains affordable, capital growth will occur, no matter how much it like averageously increases by. If it's still affordable and there's demand, it's going to grow. Simple as that. And the only reason I track the last 3 years of growth or the last 5 years of growth is because for me as an investor, as a mindset, in Townsville, I've missed out. If I go in now, I've missed out on a good 60% of growth. I don't mind missing out on 20%. I don't mind missing out 30%. But if I'm missing out 60% of growth, and it's no longer affordable or it's hitting that affordable ceiling, it makes me question about whether I could be finding another market to go into,
mm,
or it's just too difficult to enter that market. And missing out on 60% of growth over 3 years is just not something I can get my head around personally.
yeah.
I know some people are okay with that and they think you'll go to the moon. Sure, that's fine by me. Sorry, fine by you.
Yeah.
But I do track it, yes. But the 10-year average, I I don't care as much personally. I know some people like live it by it's like the Bible or something.
Mm,
But I think if the fundamentals are right, supply and demand, then it should be okay. It should grow.
right.
Basing your investment decision on a portfolio over one metric or one or two metrics is not a good way to go about investing in a property. I think there's a lot of things you need to look at, a lot of things you need to sit down and analyze. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's why a famous YouTuber said they have more than 35 metrics. If you
I
know
think that's
which one
PK,
I'm
isn't
referring
it?
to.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, look, he says it, and I fully agree with him. I fully agree with him. Basing your decisions off, one choice is not a good way to make a purchase in anything, really. I mean, if you go buy, I don't know, if you buy a car and you just base it off the color only and not look at anything else,
Mm,
you don't know whether you're buying a good car or not. And if you just go and be like, oh, Townsville hasn't, or like this suburb hasn't grown, it's only grown 1% in 10 years. That must be a good location to go buy. No, that's not how you do it.
mm,
You know, it's one metric. I don't get too hung up on it. If it's more or less, just look at the fundamentals of it.
yeah.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah. I think with that metric, people can tell whereabouts in the property cycle.
Mm,
And then people more sold if it's like in the starting point of a new cycle. But like you said, we can't just rely on one metric to make a decision. It has to be weighted, and then you have a suite of dozen metrics that will kind of support your whole decision making. Yeah,
no,
makes sense.
absolutely. It's if it's below that 10%, it's a great, like, yes, like it's good. But again, just don't base off on one metric. It's not good.
Yeah, don't just get too obsessed with that. Yeah, I totally
Yeah,
agree.
so yeah.
So we talk about previous growth, what about prediction for the future growth? And which metric or what are the suite of metrics that you are using to predict the future? And how far are you able to track?
Okay. I think the future predictability goes only about I would say 2 to 3 years realistically is what you can get supply and demand you can understand a good supply and demand. Like some of these regional locations, if you call up enough agents and you talk to them, you'll understand that there's a serious shortage of homes being built in this area. They've got sometimes 2 years lag worth of properties that they're not building, and they just don't have the resources, they don't have the tradies to build up these properties. So then from that alone, you can tell that the supply is going to be very low for about 2 years, and that will cause prices to grow. And if you just sort of track back these past few booms, Elizabeth had about South Australia and Elizabeth had about 2 to 3 years good run.
Mm.
Perth has had about a 2 to 3 year good run. Now we're having the FOMO investors coming in and still sort of inflating prices up. Townsville, the people who bought early was 2 to 3 years ago generally, and now it's getting again, the FOMO investors going in and buying it up those locations. And generally the hot locations last about 2 to 3 years from what I've seen so far.
Mm.
From what I've seen so far, that's what it is. And I don't think you can really extend it further than that. The only caveat to that is this is why you invest in very economically diverse regional towns. If you can't afford capital cities, but if you go into a regional that's economically diverse, that has a growing population, that that's what will keep the long term growth going generally. But you can't predict, in my opinion, you can't predict what's going to happen in 10, 15 years' time. I don't even think that far. I think everyone's personal circumstances also change within that time. And a lot of things could change during that time as well. And in terms of a general prediction in affordable housing, it's not going to get any better in the next 5 years. We have a huge supply crisis. We don't have enough tradies. We don't have enough, cost of goods, timber, materials, construction costs. They're all so high at the moment. There's a huge lag of supply. The government can only do so much in terms of supply. We have overseas migration that's quite high now as well coming into our country. Even though that's holding up our economy, it's also has an adverse effect on people
Mm-hmm.
who live in Australia. So there's no supply in the near future in the next 5 years. So if you can get in the market, I suggest you get in soon and you get in now if you can,
Mm.
because I think it's becoming in any of these big regional hubs like Townsville or Bendigo or Ballarat. It's hard to come across properties under $450,000. Yes, you can find in Ballarat and Geelong, sorry, but in the ones that are growing, it's becoming increasingly hard to find these under $450,000 properties. I might have to change my company name.
Mm.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Uh,
change your company name
but
probably every 6 months.
every 6 months, because that's honestly that's how it's going, right?
Yeah.
Like it's becoming harder and harder to find these properties, and people's incomes aren't growing as fast as you'd expect, and that's going to put a serious pause on people's borrowing capacity.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you know what a grim prediction is. I think a lot of people are going to be living in apartments for the rest of their life, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Don't
I
think
think
they'll be
that's
able
the
to afford
shift
a house.
that, yeah, the market is turning. Probably that's government want people to consider.
You know what? And as well, like, and again, like, if you don't want to be investing in property, I know this is an investment podcast, but like, if you don't want to be investing in property and you don't want to have the mental struggle with it all, and unsure about what you should do, tenant does this, buy an apartment. It's still very very affordable in Sydney for two people to afford an apartment in Sydney or Melbourne or Queensland. It's very affordable, and that will grow with time. It might not grow as much as a house for sure and land, but it will grow. Just don't buy a massive high-rise apartment with huge strata costs and pools and gardens. Buy a simple small apartment, like low-level apartment, so under 5 levels or under 4 levels. A solid apartment. Not none of these new high-rise fancy buildings. They will all have defects, I guarantee you. And that way you'll still have a property and you won't have the stress of investing. You'll just pay a mortgage.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends that are like, "Hey, I know you do this investment thing, but I don't want to do it. It's too stressful for me." I'm like, "Okay," and then they complain about not being able to buy a house. I agree. It's hard to buy a house. It is. In a capital city, it's hard. You have to look at the next best thing, mate. Like, unfortunately, and that is apartments.
Yeah.
And if you have inheritance, then you're lucky. If you're not, then unfortunately, this is just the way it is. And the government is not going to come and help you people. Like, no offense. And all these government schemes, whatever political side you're on, I don't have no biases. But if they give out grants, that will only cause inflation in house prices, and add more pressure into the market and more demand. So it doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which side you vote for? I think they're still gonna throw the handouts in the first
Yeah, I mean,
scheme, stuff like that.
it, it doesn't really matter which side it is because I think Labour one gives out grants, and if Liberal comes, then they give out. I think super. They give more access to super to buy a house.
Mm,
So either way, you're adding more, people who couldn't afford property into the market who can now afford property, which without increasing supply, and so you have more demand and diminishing supply. And basic economics will teach you that only keeps house prices up and makes it only go further up.
mm.
So either way, it's not going to help. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents on it. And you know, I think if you can get into the market, I would suggest getting in. Just do it in a smart way. Understand your cash flow. Don't get FOMO, and take your time and do some analysis.
Mm. Excellent. So, Jay, what's your ultimate goals? Are you
Oh, also,
investing for the sake of purchasing a home in the future, or is there a number in your mind that you want to achieve in 20 years' time or something?
no, I'm not. I got into property because I understood, like I said before, but I understood that in Australia you have to buy a property if you want to stay with the curve at least, and you don't get pushed back in this generational divide. Unfortunately, that's what I got into it for. And I'm trying to build a property portfolio. Absolutely, there's no two ways about that. I think it just helps me in general. I don't mind renting for the rest of my life. It becomes an issue if when I have kids in the future because I don't want to be having to move everywhere and then if they go into high school that's where they may meet their lifelong friends. So
Mm,
at that point in time I would consider buying a house if I can afford it. I don't know what the house prices will look like in 5-10 years time, but yeah. So there's no ultimate goal with property investing. I know some people try to go financial freedom, and I don't think property investing is necessarily the way. I think you can retire maybe or you or your partner, but the both of you, I don't know if the numbers really add up. So yeah, I think it's just building the property portfolio because I don't want to be left behind. That's the main reason, and that's genuinely out of fear of being left behind
mm,
and being left behind with a generational divide. I mean, you see it in real time. The value of our money or cash diminishes with all this inflation has diminished significantly. Our buying power has diminished significantly, and if I have an asset that can grow while I sleep, then that only helps me. And so that's why I got into property. And yeah, I'll have to figure out my end goal later down the track. But I,
mm.
I believe in long term property investing and sticking to the fundamentals of buying good quality properties in economically diverse regional locations because that's what I can afford.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah. I think that's the most realistic narrative I've heard in terms of why people start property investment. Because normally people they're quite inspirational, right? They say I want to achieve financial free within even less than 20 years time, and then
Mm,
they have a number in their mind. For example, like $2,000 dollar per week.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, but I think you're more down to the earth. Like I just want to start, right?
yeah,
Because there's no other way for me
mm.
to kind of escape the rat race. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
And the thing is, I guess for me as well personally, like I, as weird as it sounds, I actually enjoy working. Maybe not necessarily my job, but I enjoy like the hustle a little bit. I like,
Yeah.
working out these market analysis, this property analysis, and I enjoy my consulting industry for the moment. I enjoy it.
Mm,
And I also don't know what I'm gonna do if I retire because I don't like traveling as much internationally. I don't really travel that much, so that's what everyone says. I'm gonna retire and travel and enjoy my life. I'm like, okay, that's good for you, but I don't really enjoy that, so I don't know what I'm going to do. So I just stick to working, and so I don't mind that in my position. And honestly, if I'm financially free, that's good. But I'll still wake up the next day and keep working and keep making videos and articles.
yeah. Nice. Probably I can come a bit more often to our podcast and share your
Yeah,
thoughts if that's
100%.
okay.
I'm always
Yeah.
happy to come on, and I'll try get the YouTube videos up more frequently. It's hard because I genuinely do call agents within the area and talk to them about what's happening in the market, and
Mm,
that does take time. Even though it does take not that much time, but it does take time, and
yeah, I agree.
within my day job and everything. So
Yeah, because I
mm,
recently started
I
calling the Glaston agents, so I know
yeah, yeah.
exactly how you feel.
And how are they taking it? I feel like they'll be like, it's super hot. It's super hot at the moment.
Yeah, it is super hot. Yeah, it's got snapped up pretty quickly. I want to give you the chance to give a plug on your website on your platform. Now we are kind of approaching the end of this episode. Yeah, I'll give you a 10 seconds elevated pitch.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to know an in-depth analysis of suburbs, if you want to know where I'm looking at, what I'm not looking at, what you should avoid, what you should consider, hop onto my newsletter articles. They're very in-depth and very in detail, but it takes 5 minutes to read on the train to work, and it gives you my clear thoughts and my analysis. So just hop onto www.under450k.com.au, and it's there. It's all for free. I never gatekeep. I will never hold suburbs or my thoughts or my opinions to myself. I'll always share them. So go and have a read. Let me know your thoughts. Argue with me, please. I like to be proven wrong so I can prove I'm right after that. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, G. Yeah, because I'm one of the subscribers there. So just check it out. I'll post your website, the URL in the show notes, so people can just click
Mhm.
and jump on the website, check things out. Cool. Thanks, G. Thanks for your time today, and hopefully we can see you soon.
No problem. Thank you for having me on, Will.